We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully your day is going well. It is Sunday. Sundays are always a tough day to do the show because there's not a lot going on. Well, I got two advantages today, actually three. First of all, there is some things going on that we need to talk about. The other two advantages I have are two listeners, not one, two listeners. Fred, who's in Chicago, and Tony, who's in South Carolina. Welcome to you both. You guys worked this out behind my back. Fred called Tony and worked it out and said, yeah, when do you want to do this? But I'm happy. I'm happy that you guys decided to do this. This is great. Welcome.
Well, I appreciate it. Talking to Fred a little bit through text and then going back and listening to the podcast, I thought, okay, there's a fellow warrior in the fight. And so yeah. I'm just kind of honored and privileged to be with the both of you guys here.
Yeah, feelings definitely mutual. I was, I guess you could say I was trolling Tony through his Aiken Saber Academy site, and it's just I've kind of been following it. And he reached out. We just started talking, and we said, "Hey, let's get Mike on board, and we'll do a show together."
Yeah, I'm always for it. I mean, people, I get people who come to me and they'll say, well, like there's a guy I had on the show. His name is Tristan Reynolds. He has a podcast himself. He's a friend on Facebook. He follows on TikTok, and he was on the show, and I was on his show with his partner a long time ago. And I said, you should come on the show again, Tristan. And he says, well, I was waiting for an invitation. Here's the deal with this show. Don't count on me for invitations. Nobody who listens to the show needs an invitation. All you have to do is send an email, say, Mike, I'm ready, and you're in. But if there's so many different people and I forget so much shit, and I'm trying to do the shows I do singly. If you want to come in, come on, just send me an email. You don't have to wait for an invitation. We're all family here.
Well, the audience doesn't know. If you're going to come on the show, wear clothes.
Yeah.
So, a blankie and bunny slippers just doesn't cut it. Mike's too nice to put that warning out, and you would think you wouldn't need it, but Mike was just telling Fred and I some horror stories behind the scenes.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people come on without a shirt. They were males, so it was fine. It's just disconcerting trying to talk about serious shit when you've got some sweaty older body on the other side of the screen. I go, I don't need that shit. I don't need that shit. Well, we had the indictment. This is to both you guys. We had the indictment, and that went well. And then you think that would be over with, but the judge, who was not the Judge Chutkan that we're planning to oversee this hearing, it was a magistrate judge, but she very specifically told Donald Trump, keep your fucking big mouth shut. Don't throw any evidence out there. Don't throw any threats out there. And of course, Donald Trump's like an incorrigible child. He comes out and makes the threat, you come at me, I'll come at you. And of course, that caused kind of a shit show. Jack Smith, who's not in the business to play fucking games, is asked for an order of protection because he's concerned about what Donald Trump's going to do when he finally gets the evidence when they turn it over in discovery. So that goes to the judge. And then, of course, Donald Trump says, we can't come in Monday to talk to you about this. How about Thursday? And the judge said, fuck you. You're coming in Monday. Donald Trump's finally getting some accountability and finding somebody who's not ready to bend for him anymore. And I'm excited about this.
Fred? But he didn't just stop with that. That you thought that'd be the end of it. Afterwards, he went after Mike Pence too.
Oh yeah.
In a tweet a couple hours ago, or a truth, whatever you want to call it. He goes, so he obviously, it's almost like he's begging for a gag order. So he can be like, well, see what they did to me, look what they can do to you, sort of thing. So I don't want to say it's calculated. I don't know if he's smart enough to do this, but I just feel like he's got, he's just playing the game. I really feel that.
Well, I'll amplify that. First of all, he's back to lying because now he's saying that tweet that release had to do with the Koch brothers and those. He's threatening rhinos, which is an obvious lie. But the second thing is, I absolutely agree with Fred. It's calculated because he knows he's not going to win in court. So he's got to use his followers to sway public opinion. The unfortunate part is that he's got almost the entire Republican Party that's up in Washington towing the party line and saying the same thing. And that's where the danger lies. Trump himself is dangerous enough, but you throw a whole party behind him with a lot of money and a national news organization. Now we've got, and that's where he's attacking from. He's going to attack from the public side of things.
Now, I got a different take on this than both of you guys. I mean, what you're saying makes some sense. But I think you and a lot of other people give Donald Trump way too much credit for intelligence. What I see out of this guy is just somebody. Well, first of all, his lawyers can't control him, and that's a problem in the first place. But secondly, Donald Trump, to suggest he might be calculating, I think that's a stretch. I mean, I think he's the kind of guy I've seen before that is completely emotional, completely reactionary, and just says whatever comes into his head. There is no chess game. There is no strategy to it. You know, everybody say, every time I hear somebody say, Donald Trump, this is a strategy, it reminds me of that movie with Peter Sellers, Zelig, where every time he says something, oh, that's brilliant. And it's just something he saw on a TV show. That's what Donald Trump reminds me of. I think we give him too much credit for intelligence. He's so reactionary that he just says whatever comes in his head. And if you come against him, he's going to come back with some other shit. It's not even thought about. That's my thinking.
The only thing that I would say, and I agree with you, he's not smart, he's not intelligent, he wouldn't be in this kind of trouble, is the fact that he instinctively understands the MAGA crowd. You know, he is a populist. They are following him. They won't follow anybody else. So he shrewdly is using them and weaponizing them as both a threat and as a means of furthering his own ends. Now, because he does a lack of intelligence and he's now dealing with grown-ups with in Washington, it's not going to work. They're going to follow through. There's not going to be any continuances. It's going to move at a pace. Now, will it move within 90 days to court? Probably not, because that's not how the federal system works. I mean, that's what I've heard. Everything I'm looking, the speedy trial 90 days. That's what the federal guidelines are. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think the discovery on this is going to be a lot quicker than in the classified documents. So I think this will definitely take off before the classified documents, because there's not classified material involved. They don't have to vet jurors and vet attorneys. So I think 90 days. I don't think that's reasonable. But I could see it being before the end of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Do you ever think, with all the worries we've had about the Mar-a-Lago, the classified documents case, and the judge there, if what's going on in Washington, and presuming we get some more superseding indictments, does the Florida case even really matter? Because it's only going to take one felony conviction to fucking put him down. And he's going to get more than that. Jack Smith doesn't throw out all these convictions or these charges without knowing he's got a pretty good chance of winning. It kind of puts the Mar-a-Lago thing in the back seat. People are kind of focused on January 6th, and then Georgia comes out. I have a feeling that what's going on down in Florida will be the third most important set of trials that we see. And I think Manhattan will probably be fourth.
I totally agree with you. I think Florida, she's not a very competent judge. It's going to go at its own pace. It'll probably be tried after the election because it'll go at its own pace. But, the only thing that'll slow down the January 6th court case is just the scope of it. There's so much. There's so many witnesses, and they're going to want to put some witnesses on the stand.
Yeah.
I doubt that Pence will show up in person, so they'll have to use video testimony. But overall, I think that is the threat. And frankly, I'm glad it's in the location that it's in. I just don't think, I think we could have ended up with a hung jury down in Florida.
Yeah, I think so. But I think with the January 6th case, I think, because everyone was screaming, like, why wasn't he indicted for insurrection or anything like that? I think Jack Smith kept the scope of it smaller to avoid it being dragged out till after the election next year to make it easier to have a speedy trial. He knows what he's doing. I mean, he's very calculated in what he's doing, and I'm like on the fence about, are there more indictments coming? Is there going to be a superseding indictment in this case as well? And I think there's going to be more people indicted, members of Congress, Ginny Thomas, people like that. I just think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's definitely more coming.
I think there's no question about that. I mean, he wanted to make sure that Donald Trump was taken out of the equation, and the only way he could do it based on what he saw down in Florida, he made one indictment. It's Donald Trump. It's focused. You don't have classified documents. You have to get people certified to be able to see. It may be a longer trial, but it's not going to be that long. Like you said, maybe toward the end of the year. This is a fail safe, I think, for Jack Smith. I'll guarantee you, he's got probably 15 to 20 more indictments coming out of the J6 thing. Because I've always said that they're going to go after the people in Congress, and now we're getting little hints and inklings that, yeah, that's true. And the 6 will get indicted too, the co-conspirators. So you could see 10 to 15, maybe even 20 more indictments. And I think Donald Trump will get more indictments too, because those members of Congress will be connected to Donald Trump and Mark Meadows. I mean, that's the key. Mark Meadows, you don't hear a thing about him, and he is the one that was closest to Donald Trump. So, he spilled his guts all over the fucking place.
There's a lot of information. There are a lot of people in trouble. I think we'll see some moves. If they go after Ginny Thomas, it might be a way of getting Judge Thomas off the bench, because there's no way he'd stay on the bench. And so to me, on a personal level, that would be very satisfying to see. But to see him go after Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest of the stooges would be awesome. I think they're a secondary target, but I think their time is coming. But the scope of the January 6th in its totality is huge. And it looks like Jack Smith has got the resources he needs. And, he's got the A team, whereas Trump, I'm not sure his group of lawyers, you can call them a C team, I guess.
I wouldn't even call him a C team.
No, hell no.
They've got nothing to work with. He leaves them nothing to work with. He goes out, he sticks his foot in his mouth, and they then have to try to recover from whatever he says. So I think you're exactly right. He's got the brain power of maybe a jellyfish, and that's not saying much.
Well, and that's the thing, is we know that lawyers have a hell of a problem with Donald Trump because they can't control him. He hires the lawyers and then he tells them what to say. And Donald Trump isn't very smart. For the life of me, I don't know why lawyers, other than cash or publicity, but this publicity is not going to be good. I mean, this lawyer that went on TV and basically implicated Donald Trump in a crime when he was talking on the air. I got to believe this guy isn't that stupid, but he's having to do the bidding of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So because they're willing to do that, they look stupid too.
I was laughing at the Alina Habba interview.
Oh, yeah.
She's standing in front. She's got the low cut shirt on, cleavage hanging out. I'm thinking, I know exactly why Donald Trump hired her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just hangs around the office all day in that same shirt. And he is what he is. I mean, let's face it, this guy is a lech. It always has been a lech. And hopefully, with any luck whatsoever, he'll spend the last few years in jail. And, I keep hearing, and tell me what you guys think, that there will be a plea bargain. You guys, and where he basically resolves never to run for public office and keeps his freedom. What do you guys think?
I can't see him doing that. He's too much of a narcissist. I mean, it's I don't want to say he doesn't know that he did something wrong, but what we know about classic narcissists, I mean, he's a textbook malignant narcissist.
Absolutely.
I think he thinks that he's just going to get away with it and nothing's going to happen to him. That, well, because his whole life, his dad was bailing him out, and now he was president. He was behind that. Now he's actually being held accountable. But I still honestly think that he thinks that nothing can happen to him. So I think he'll go to trial and think that he's going to go home to his shitty resort in Mar-a-Lago and he's going to be fine.
I'd be hard pressed to see him admit guilt, and he would have to admit guilt. And then when he was made to admit guilt, he'd kind of shuffle his feet and he wouldn't really say it. And then there would be a big shit show about that. But here's the thing. If you're Jack Smith, are you going to offer a settlement? I mean, this is a historic trial. This is about a guy who tried to overthrow our government. There's a lot of value in running this trial through the ringer, not only for Jack Smith's career, but for the sake of the country. I just don't think he's going to offer a deal. I heard somebody say that the lawyers for Donald Trump wanted to work a deal out with the Mar-a-Lago thing, and Jack said no. And I'll be honest with you, Bonnie Willis, she's more of a gangster than Jack Smith. She ain't going to settle with that motherfucker. She's going to take him down. I mean, the sheriff even said, yeah, we're not going to play that shit here. He's getting handcuffed and we're getting a mug shot. So I'm looking forward to that.
What about Merrick Garland?
I think Merrick Garland is a lot like Donald Trump. He's too old school. He's playing the game like it used to be played in the 80s and 90s. He's not with the times. Times have changed, and the way we do things are different. You know, I've talked about Joe Biden. Well, we want to keep the filibuster. We don't want to expand the Supreme Court. But the fact of the matter is, there was a time when people would say that, but everything's changed now. I think Merrick Garland's a little slow on the uptake. He's worried about being political, and that's fine with most situations, but this is a 7-alarm fire. We don't have time to fuck around like that.
You don't think he'll overrule Jack Smith?
No,
Yeah.
no.
I don't know. No, I don't think he will at all. I think he kind of gave Jack Smith carte blanche, say do what you do, do what you have to do. I mean, just by I think his hand was forced by the court of public opinion because, I mean, if what we've heard is true, that he sat on it for a year before he
Right.
actually started the investigation when he hired Jack Smith. But no, I'm with Mike. I don't. Yeah, I think Jack Smith is just you do what you do, and that's it.
If Merrick Garland was going to override it, he would have done it before the indictments. Once the indictments are going, it's going. He's not going to shut it down after this.
I actually agree with you guys. I think it's really personal. Listening to Trump defame them over the last few months, it's now personal, and they want to see him. I think they want to see him in handcuffs and on his way to the big house.
But I think it's important. Like I said, I think it's important for the country that we see this through. Donald Trump doesn't get to say, "Oh, I'll just settle with this and I'll go away and we can forget about it." This was too egregious. This was too dangerous to the security of our country. It needs to go through the process, and we need to get the win in order to get that closure. We didn't have it with Richard Nixon when Gerald Ford pardoned him. In retrospect, that was a bad choice, but they said, well, we got to let the country heal. We've gone so far now, the only way the country can heal is if that fucker gets convicted and everybody else that was with him.
Yeah. I think it's too late for the country to heal, to be honest with you, but it certainly can maybe cut it down a little bit without him rabble-rousing out there.
Yeah.
Well, it's just sad, like how the country has become so divided, like what Donald Trump did to the country. And like Mike said, we've gone so far one way, we've got to go far the other way to get us back to center. And it's just, I wasn't alive in the 60s. I don't know what that was like, the 60s and 70s, the whole Nixon thing and Watergate. But I mean, it's just the division, like I've got a neighbor a couple of doors down is a Trumplican, and won't talk to me because I had a pride flag in front of my house. So it's sad. And I like to think that Tony's wrong, but I don't know. Yeah, you might be right.
Well, the thing is, this started downhill long before Trump. It really started with Newt Gingrich, this kind of politics
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
and the money that came into it. And then when they opened the floodgates and Fox News became an actual big entity, it's past Trump. Trumpism is going to outlive Trump, which is good for us in a way, so long as the MAGA stay in charge of that party. But they'll probably make changes because you're already finding that the party is going broke at the state level. So
Right.
because the MAGAs are in charge of it. So, Trump goes away, he goes to jail. Hopefully they stifle him from speaking. But I think what he did and the way he did it lives on past him, because you see it in the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the rest of the hideous bunch that are up there in Congress.
Well, the thing about it is we can blame the Republicans and Donald Trump for the divisiveness in this country, but there's one other culprit that we have to acknowledge, and that is the media. When Tony and I were young in the 60s, we'd watch Walter Cronkite or Huntley and Brinkley, and they were pretty straightforward newscasts. They weren't biased in any way. They gave us the news, and we had to figure it out. Then when we had that Iran crisis with the hostages in Iran, and Ronald Reagan got them out and playing games with that. That's when Nightline came on. Nightline came on just to cover that Iran crisis. It went 44 days. And then when it was done, the networks go, fuck, we can make money from news, because they never made money from news before. And at that point, they turned into, it was a slow going, but they became more tabloid. So now if you're watching the news and you're Republican or Democrat, we're watching different sources getting totally different stories. So when I argue with the Trump-a-fuck and I say, what about this? And they'll say, I never heard that. Because they didn't, because the source they're going to doesn't give them that information.
Yeah, point in case, I went to my chiropractor. I've known this guy a couple of years. I didn't realize he was a libertarian. And we got to talking about Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family. And he gets his news from Newsmax and Fox, and his worldview is so totally different. Then now I don't know what impact that has on my chiropractor. Good thing there's two of them there. So
Yeah.
I'll go days when he's not there. But I was just dismayed between the width and the gulf between the two realities. And I like you, Mike. Unlike you, Mike, I don't sit there and argue with them, just to rile them up. First of all, this guy's got his hands on my neck.
Yeah.
Once a week, so I'm not going to argue what he's twisting. But the second thing is it's just dismaying to see that gulf.
I can kind of piggyback off that. We had a family reunion in my family a few weeks ago. I didn't really want to go, but my brother talked me into it. And my family in Ohio, a lot of family in Ohio and Wisconsin, some in Minnesota. And so we had it in Ohio. So there's a lot of the Ohio family, and they're all, I'd say 90% of them are Trumplicans. And I have a cousin. She's about my age. She's late 40s, but she's been on Social Security disability for about 10 years. And she's wearing a shirt that says Trump 2024. And she says, "Oh, I wore this for you, you snowflake." And I turn around like, you're talking to me? And she's like, "Yeah, and, what about, why aren't you wearing your Biden shirt?" And she's like, I've literally been there 5 minutes. She's starting shit with me. And, we're talking a little bit, and I just don't want to talk to her. And I said, wait a minute. So you're against socialism, you're against liberals, but correct me if I'm wrong, have you been getting Social Security for the last 10 years? And she's like, "Well, that's different." I said, "Well, how is it different?" And she's like, "Well, your book," and then she starts talking about the Biden crime family. I said, "Hey, if somebody in their family did something wrong, they should absolutely be held accountable." And that was it. She was speechless. I'm like, what do you want me to say? It's like, you're ridiculous. You're sitting there how you're against socialism, but then you're collecting Social Security for 10 years, and Trump is the only answer, but he wants to get rid of your Social Security. So, I'm kind of like you, Tony. I can't.
The,
I
You
just
can't,
the,
there's no
the,
changing minds. My mother-in-law, before she died, was as much a MAGA person as you can. Everything, bleach in the blood, cure COVID, all of that. And there's no talking. So all I could do when she visited was ban politics from any conversation in my home. You know, we just can't get there from here with the way things are in the country. But the country's been through worse. I mean, you see culturally, you're seeing the last gasp, and we've talked about this the last time I was on the show, of conservatism, and they're pushing back rights, and they're doing all that they're doing at the state level. But it's the last gasp, because at the same time you watch television and the commercials have multicultural families, and it's everywhere. They're not going to be able to stop the country from moving on.
I think one of the problems we have with parties now, when you meet somebody like Fred's talking about, it's almost like we've degraded politics down to college football. Fuck Ohio State. Fuck Oklahoma. Fuck the Gophers. If it's not your team, you hate them. And that's the problem, because when we're talking about Congress, there is two parties, but the whole point of Congress is to negotiate and compromise. And we don't have that at all in Congress. So we don't have a Congress that's actually working. The point was to take two sides and put them together and work something out. And I'm all for that. But when one just blocks the other one, and the Democrats do it too, so the whole system of our government doesn't fucking work.
I like to think, though, there is a slight ray of hope in all this with, I think it was in Texas, they deemed the abortion law too restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's going on in Ohio, they're having a vote on Tuesday. I think that's just because the Republicans in Ohio are trying to make it a 60% threshold to change their constitution, because they've got that abortion vote coming up in November. So I like to think that things are starting to turn, with little victories here and there. So we'll see.
Yeah. You know me as the ray of hope guy. That's one of my claims to fame on TikTok. People always say, I'm so scared till I listen to you, and now I know there's hope. And there always is hope. If you don't have hope, you might as well fucking curl up in a ball and just wait for the storm to come and kill you. But when we're looking at what it is, I don't want to seem too negative about it, because I do sense, and maybe you do too, sense a decided turn in the country. Now, when Donald Trump was president, to use a hippie term, the vibe was Donald Trump and the Republicans get away with everything. Nothing's ever going to stop them, and we're just fucked. But now, with what's happened with the indictments and the elections and such, I feel that shift going more the right way, meaning the left way. And when I look at what's going on with Donald Trump now, like with Jack Smith and this Chutkan judge in Washington, D.C., the tide is turning slowly, but that one thing is going to fucking slam it home and head it down the hill for the Republicans. I think they've blown their wad, and they've got really no place to go at this point. It's going to go badly for them.
Well, I think with Donald probably going to jail, that ends that main threat. That's a deterrence from anybody else ever doing that again, especially if they put a few Congress people in jail. But even if it goes back to normal is the kind of Congress that Clinton and Obama had to deal with. And, you still have a floodgates. I agree with you. The ship is turning, but it's an aircraft carrier, so it turns really slow. Right. Because then the fight will be then over policy. And he was just a useful idiot for policy anyway. He was dangerous in that he wanted to overturn the country. And I think the powers that support that side, the money powers, they didn't condone that whatsoever. So once he's gone, then it goes back to policy. They only have one policy, and that's a tax cut for the rich anyway. But it all gets lost as the money goes out, and they distract and they point in different directions, and they use their money to influence the policy. And it's a shame, because the Trump people, the actual average blue collar middle class people, they want what the rest of us want. They want to feel like they're being supported and that things can be a little bit easier in their lives. They want that. And that's why they voted for Trump, because they thought Trump was a populist. He's not a populist. He's a billionaire who was going to cut his own taxes. He's just willing to lie to it. But the next guy will come in and it'll be about policy, and we're back to that fight. So, and they've shown a willingness to cheat at the state level to get their way. So the initiative in Ohio is a prime example of the legislature overriding. So that battle is going to go on for maybe another decade or so until the younger generations take over, is my hope. But I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I just don't know that Mike, you and I will see it.
Well, I'll let you know from the other side if I'm still around.
Yeah, come on by. Mike and I'll be hanging and having a beer there. So
Yeah, there you go.
let us know what's going on planet Earth.
Yeah, but yeah, I gotta say, when January 6th went down, that whole thing, that was probably the most pessimistic I've ever been with our country's future. And I, like Mike, wasn't so terrified for myself. I'm like, well, I've got a kid, it's like, what's the world going to be like for him? So, I'm thankful every day that I live in a liberal state, and, they've taken steps to protect various groups' rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights and everything. So, I've just, everything I can say is I'm just trying to teach my son to be a good person, and, just kind of tune out the bullshit. And, because it's the best thing I can do, but I can say though that I've gotten a lot more optimistic in the last 6 months, and so much more so in the last month with the indictments coming out and everything. So, and, I'll give Mike a pat on the back, it's, he gives me hope, he calms me down.
Well, the thing about it is here's something you may not be considering, and something I see happening anyway. You're talking about after the indictments, Donald Trump gets put in jail, whatever, that we go kind of back to normal. My question is, what is normal? I say, if you thought before Donald Trump was normal and you think we're going to be that again after Donald Trump's out of the way, I think you're mistaken. I think we're in a whole new world. And I think that the Republicans, when they go through what they go through in 2024, assuming I'm right, and there's a blue wave and they get knocked out of the presidency, the House, and the Senate, at that point, they're going to have to sit back. They should have done this 2 years ago, but at that point, they're going to go, wow, we fucked up. We better reimagine this shit, because they're going to take such a drubbing that they're going to have to change everything that is the Republican Party. And I don't know how they'll do that. Some of the old white people that are causing the problems now will have to go by the wayside. Mitch McConnell won't be around after 2024. I'm convinced of that. Kevin McCarthy, who the fuck knows? He won't be in power. It'll be Hakeem Jeffries, who's the Speaker of the House. But I think that the Republicans should have changed 2 years ago to be more competitive in 2024. They didn't. But when 2024 hits, they have no choice, because not only the information that's come out and all the young people are coming on board, by 2028, the millennials and the Gen Zs are going to be the ones deciding the election. So they got to make a wholesale change. The Republican Party's got to be completely different if they hope to compete in the future. So policies will always be an issue, but I think that I think what we see of the Republican Party will be vastly different than anything we see now.
But I think that's got to go a step further too, with the Democrats. Now that they've got power back, they can't just do what they've done for the last 50 years. You've talked about it with Build Back Better, the transformational bill that we haven't seen since the New Deal.
Right.
And Roe v. Wade. Now's the time. They got to get all this shit done. And if it means getting rid of the filibuster, you got to do it. Because without a middle class, this country is nothing.
Right.
So I agree with both of you up to a point. And
well, that's not good enough.
The point being that it's Joe Biden running in 24. Mm-hmm. And I hope you both are right, and that he goes for legendary status to to make sure that his legacy is great. I'm just not convinced that he'll do it. I think he should pack the Supreme Court. I think he should do everything that you said. I think the Congress should do everything that you said. But the other side is more beholden to corporate interests and rich people interests. I just don't think they're going to change. I think they're going to stay on task, and they'll use the power of their representatives that they purchased to go ahead and distract people, make them think, well, your private health insurance is the best thing ever. You don't want to get rid of your private health insurance. And that group will fall for it every single time. So I think it's going to be a grinding process that might take decades until the younger generation completely just owns the place.
Yeah, but the thing is they have to change, otherwise they're going to die in the vine. I mean, think about what happens. If there's a blue wave in 2024, they have no power. And during that time, the Democrats do a lot of good. Let's hope they do. If they do a lot of good, then they've got that momentum going into 2028. Plus, the Republicans are still trying to pull off the overturning Roe v. Wade and shit. And that's all loser shit. They can't win any elections as long as they're doing it. They're going to have to change, but in order to rehabilitate themselves to be a viable party, it's going to take 5 to 10 years.
I think the place that we'll see it is 26. So let's say the Democrats get the blue wave in 24. And history has shown that for the most part, that everything changes 2 years later.
Except in 2022.
Except in 2022. And they still managed to retake the House. They didn't have it by much, but they still took so history was accurate, but the numbers were not accurate, so we didn't keep the House. And that's what we need to do. We need to keep the House in 26. We can't have a red wave in 26. But I think the real elections that will change the course of history come after 28, to be honest. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think us, maybe not Fred, but you and I need to go away, and our ilk needs to go away. And then the Gen Xers need to get real old, because they tend to lean more towards the right than towards the left themselves.
Some of them, yeah, absolutely.
But I think what will help with the blue wave coming up for 24 is some of these is the Supreme Court decisions with Alabama having to redraw their maps, which whole nother story is they're trying to fight that or just ignoring it. But that's going to have an effect on other states as well, potentially New York, Ohio, I think, as well, has got a case. Yeah. So I think you're going to see, well, I don't want to call them fair, but I mean, they're still going to be gerrymandered, but they're going to be more favorable to Democrats.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a massive turnout in 2024 for both Republicans and Democrats. There are more Democrats than there are Republicans, so they should fare well with it. I just think that the Republicans are in a bad spot. If they get tarred and feathered in 2024, is it reasonable to assume that they finally realize that overturning Roe v. Wade, gun control, LGBTQ situations aren't winners? Do you think they abandon that and, like I say, try to remake who they are? Maybe stick with the conservative, label, not so much the behavior, but they're going to have to shapeshift some way in order to be appetizing to somebody. Yeah.
They need to revive compassionate conservatism.
Yeah, exactly. But is there such a thing?
Do you even think that they're smart enough to do that?
No.
I mean, with the conservatives in Congress?
No, there's no leader. Outside of Trump, can you think of one national leader on the Republican side?
It sure ain't Ron DeSantis. That guy's going down the shitter.
No, there's not one.
Although he did say something today that I agree with.
Wow.
He said that Trump was anything but a conservative because he added $8 trillion to the debt. And that was it. I never thought I'd say, wow, Ron DeSantis is right.
I've been saying that for 2 years and Republicans just ignore it. I said it today and a Republican ignored it. Yeah, these trials, people are really worried. Well, if we don't get the convictions before 2024, Donald Trump could win the election. And I went through this yesterday on TikTok. He's got 100. He'll have 100 plus uh, charges. There's no way he's going to run the table and not get convicted of at least 5, 6 of them. It's just not possible. And in terms of winning an election, whether he be in jail or not, it's just not feasible. He lost by 7 million, and he's lost support and votes since that time. He's not going to win. The best president the Democrats could have is if he is the candidate.
I would say, Mike, you've mentioned it. I haven't heard you say it lately. They pissed off the women.
Yeah.
It's going to be huge in 24. They done pissed off the women, and you're seeing it at the state level. The Republican women, the independent women, if Trump is their nominee, they're going to come home to roost, and it will be, like you said, it's going to be a blue wave. But then we have to, will they reform to something else? If they can find somebody to lead the party, maybe Mitt Romney or someone of that stature.
Too old. They need a young, strong. See, that's where the Democrats are in a good situation. There's a lot of young potential leaders: Hakeem Jeffries, Katie Porter, Eric Swalwell, even somebody like Jamie Raskin. He's not real young, but there's a lot of people out there that are, or Gavin Newsom. He looks like he's trying to set himself up for 2028. But Democrats have a good farm team. Republicans don't.
Yeah, they had someone decent in Adam Kinzinger, and what'd they do? They exiled him.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah, it's the Republicans have put themselves so deep in a hole, it's going to be impossible for them to dig them out. And what I don't understand is they're watching Donald Trump. They're watching him. They know he's going to go down. They know he's going to go down. My question is, why do they continue to embrace this fucking clown? I mean, politicians, it used to be back in the 60s, if one politician had some scandal with a woman or got divorced or visited a psychiatrist, they'd say, oh, fuck, we don't want to touch him. He was exiled because he was too much bad news. Now they just fucking embrace the worst of them all.
Well, even as late as Al Franken.
Yeah.
What he did, that's nothing compared to what's going on now.
No, I mean, he got fucked on that deal because it was right after the Me Too thing and everybody was sensitive. I said one thing too, if you're going to put a Democrat, if you're going to put one old white guy Democrat who might be a good president, it would be Al Franken. We saw what he did in the Senate. He's a smart motherfucker, and he doesn't take any shit.
He is absolutely. Yeah, we ate our young. But you're right. I mean, I think we have a good chance. I don't understand why they're a party. They can decide by vote within the party who their nominee is. If they just said, you're not going to be our nominee, Mr. Donald Trump, it would be a bloodbath for him anyway. But at least they would retain their dignity and honor, and they can put somebody else to take a beating, pick one, and maybe the person that they pick in 24 does immediately well, and maybe Donald runs as an independent. And maybe he crushes them, but he does poorly and loses. He's going to lose anyway. But they're going to have the stench of Trump on them for a long time.
It's just incredible to me. Like, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Kevin McCarthy was defending Trump when the indictment dropped, and he was talking about, well, Hillary, what she did in 2016, if she wasn't arrested, and the DNC, whatever that was, and then Bush v. Gore, like no one was arrested for that. And he's just like, he's such a bad actor. And you're listening, it's like, he probably just like, okay, they're going to ask me this is my response. And it's like, he's so emboldened to MAGA. There's no future for him. He's going to be a 2-year Speaker of the House, and, the weakest speaker we've ever had in the history of Congress.
No question. And that's the thing that amazes me is they can see what's happening. They know he's going down. I mean, people will jump off the Minnesota Vikings bandwagon faster than a fucking Republican will jump off Donald Trump. And this guy's going to lose. And is it that he has something on them, or what are they afraid of? Or they just unwilling to say they were wrong. They've gone in too deep and they aren't willing to step back. I don't know what the fuck it is.
It's a party of whatever Swalwell called McCarthy. It's a whole party of that,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, it's a whole party of it. You can see it. They don't want to lose the voters that Donald brought in, but those voters are not necessarily good voters. And when Donald goes away, most of them are going to be inactive again. You got it right. They need to regain the party, take it back over again, and then rebuild it and find the slogan. They're really good at slogans. Find the slogan that gets you there. You know, there are people who will never vote Democrat ever, and they're the same people that should be Democrats, but they're never going to vote Democrat. Start with that base, rebuild your base, get back the independents, go into the suburbs, get back women. I mean, they're not going to win without women, but it's a whole change in rethinking. And the first is they got to get rid of Donald Trump. That's the very first thing they need. And then they can start their recovery.
Yeah.
Well, they could make their slogan, at least we're not the Whig party.
Yeah. No shit. No shit. I love Tony's appropriateness. He says, whatever Eric Swalwell called Kevin McCarthy. Now the people at home are going, what the fuck does he mean? Eric Swalwell called Kevin McCarthy a pussy. Now that might be not the most appropriate thing to say on the House floor, but God damn it, it was accurate. And the Republican Party as a whole is a bunch of pussy ass bitches. See, the thing is, Tony, we're on the Rational Boomer podcast. I don't have TikTok. I don't have Facebook. I don't have anybody telling me what I can't do. So we just do whatever the fuck we want here.
I'm a teacher, so I have to be maybe a little bit more cautious than you, but I share your sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we're at that point. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. I've got Tony and Fred with me on the show today. It's one of those times where we had multiple guests, and actually it wasn't even my idea. It was Fred calling Tony after Tony was on, and they worked it out and they said, we're doing this. And I go, okay, we'll do that. I'm always open to having guests on. I was telling these guys, somebody came to me on Facebook and I said, you should come on the show. And he says, well, I was waiting for an invitation. Ain't no invitations coming. You don't need an invitation here. You just send me an email, say, Mike, I want to go on, and we fucking set it up. So that's all you need to know. And it's rationalboomer@gmail.com. Well, you guys, we've gone through the indictment thing, but as of late, I've got, as they say, Georgia on my mind. 2 reasons. I'm going to Georgia a week from tomorrow. I'm going to be about 4 or 5 days. I love Savannah. But of course, we've got the imminent indictments coming out of Fani Willis. And it was funny. I was watching her being interviewed, and somebody went to her and said, you know, you got all these other trials and stuff. Is it even worth doing the indictment down here? That woman had a cold motherfucking stare. I think she would scare Jack Smith. She says, I've got an oath to follow. We're doing whatever we're doing. And I think there's a little gangster in Fani Willis. I think Donald Trump's going to have a tough time with the judge and Jack Smith in D.C., but I don't think it's going to be any easier in Georgia with Fani Willis.
They're going to I guess they'll do the trial in Atlanta, so they're not doing it in a red county. But the other part of that is, in my mind, she's the backup. If everything falls apart at the federal level, which I doubt it'll happen, she's the last hope. And he's going to have to serve both on the federal level and at the state level. I think she's actually pushed the federal the federal investigations along by moving as quickly as she has. She's a real pro. She's a nightmare for them. She's untouchable. She's unflappable. She's knowledgeable. She's got him by the cojones, and she's not going to let go.
No.
And I think to take it even one step further is if Trump is convicted federally, and for some reason, a president gets in there and decides to pardon him. They can't pardon him for the state crimes.
Right.
They can pardon him for the federal crimes only. So, it's kind of it's something you'd call in like IT. It's redundancy.
Right. Well, and I think in Georgia, I may be wrong about this, but I thought I read this. In Georgia, a governor can't pardon him either. There's some kind of committee or something that comes together that decides a pardon. So not that the governor of Georgia would pardon him. I don't think he would, but I think that Donald Trump is probably most worried about Georgia because, well, they bring up this RICO thing, and I understand it's tied to organized crime and it involves a lot of people, but I think that may be the most terrifying thing for Donald Trump and his lawyers, that fucking RICO shit.
If TV investigations or anything, RICO is used. RICO is always used, and nobody ever gets away from it. I think that was a smart move on her part to treat it like organized crime. And my only hope is that she can get Lindsey Graham and some of the other people that tried to influence the election from their perspectives. I mean, I know he's gone down there and he's had to testify. I think he's a lawyer, so I think he was able to kind of keep it as neutral as he could. But I think he should be joining Trump in the cell.
Well, we know Rudy Giuliani is a target there, so he's going to get an indictment. I'm guessing there's a lot of people that are going to get an indictment. Lindsey Graham made 2 calls. Mark Meadows, who again is seemingly nowhere to be found. But, it's one thing if Mark Meadows rolled on Donald Trump federally. That has nothing to do with Georgia. He's going to have to roll in Georgia too in order to get cut loose from any potential charges. And the question to me is, would Fani Willis even allow him to do that? Is she just going to go after fucking everybody? Because he'd have to be in that mix if he hadn't turned state's evidence.
I have a feeling that Mark Meadows is the one who has gotten a lot of these indictments, given them some steam. Because like you said, he's been very quiet and we haven't heard a lot about him. And, how else would they get a lot of this information? Because they got to corroborate it too.
Right.
And I think, he was, from what I understand, everything went through him on January 6th.
Yeah, nobody talked to Donald Trump directly. It went to Meadows, Meadows to Trump, Trump to Meadows, Meadows to whoever. So he knows where all the bodies are buried. He was involved in every step of the way. He is certainly culpable for a lot of crimes. That's why it's interesting that we don't hear from him.
Yeah, he was there with the phone calls. He was there with the setups for the fake electors. He was there and didn't tell Eastman to go pound sand someplace else. Right now, I probably think he's in a safe house someplace because, you're not seeing him. He's invisible. You don't hear about him in the media. So where is he and what did he do and what does he know? And we think, and I think we're in pretty good analysis that he is totally flipped, and he'll flip in Georgia too.
It's amazing how, they all talk tough. And then I'm sure as soon as he was presented with the opportunity to turn state's evidence, he's like, yep, I'll do it. Yep, I'll sign me up.
Well, and and that's the ironic thing when we're talking about Jack Smith earlier and even Fani Willis. There's a lot of witnesses and a lot of evidence, and the Republicans want to dispute it, but all the evidence and all the witnesses come from the Republican Party. That's the crazy thing. That's what's going to make it a slam dunk for Fani Willis and or Jack Smith or whoever else. Everybody's flipping. I mean, Jack Smith has talked to 50 people, all tied to Donald Trump.
They flipped at the House investigation of January 6th. We got to see it live. So it's all those people, plus maybe dozens more that we didn't see. And at the state level, I guess Meadows is probably the most important outside of Giuliani to flip down in Georgia. So I think she's got him. I think he flipped. See that or jail time for him too.
I feel like Republicans are. It always reminds me of that scene from Monty Python with the knight crossing the bridge,
Right.
and he cuts off his arm. He says, "Oh," he's like, "I cut your bloody arm off." He's like, "Oh, it's but a flesh wound." It's like,
Yeah.
they'll just deny it. I mean, it's like it didn't happen.
That's pretty much true.
That's a good analogy.
That sounds like Kevin McCarthy, you know, with his
Yeah.
stupid complaints. But the other aspect that comes into play in Georgia, but not just in Georgia and other states, this whole fake elector thing, because it comes off like a huge conspiracy. And each one of these states didn't come out of the blue and say, we'll go with fake electors. It had to come from somebody on top. It had to come from somebody in Washington, D.C. And now these people, the ones in Michigan, are getting indicted on the state level, and they're going, we were duped. We had no idea. Bullshit. But that's maybe the least of their concerns. I have a feeling there might be some federal charges to these fake electors too. They might get hit twice. And I think Fani Willis is got her scope right on them. She got 8 of them to flip. So I think there's another 8. And they're not only going to flip on the other electors, they're going to flip on the people who directed them and organized them. It's a fucking mess. That's where all these convictions or these charges and indictments are going to come, and that's why we're going to have a shitload of people tied to this J6 thing.
I think it's 6 to 7 states, and there are going to be a lot of local state level politicians in on this big conspiracy,
Right?
Because the people in Michigan are saying, like you said, they're saying they're duped. They got duped by local people. So that's all going to come out at the state level. And I think it's so big that it's got to be a federal investigation, whether it's Jack Smith's or something else. But, you know, Fani Willis is just a bright light there in Georgia. I mean, and she has been for a long time. While we were waiting for anything to come out of Jack Smith, Fani Willis was the one that was, you know, our best hope and the one that seemed to be pushing forward the hardest.
I don't think we will fully know the scope of what's going on with the fake electors, everything involved at January 6th. And I think it's going to be many, many months until we realize the scope and the amount of people involved. And, you know, and we may never fully know what went into it, but I think it's a lot bigger than what you or I or anybody in the general public knows.
Well, they wanted us to believe on January 6th that a bunch of rabble rousers went to the Capitol and they went a little overboard and they attacked the Capitol. But when we have fleshed this out a little bit and we're seeing Donald Trump coercing secretaries of states and governors, we've got the fake electors. This was a plan they were working on well before the election. I think they knew they were going to lose. And they had all this shit laid out. It is quite an extensive conspiracy.
You know, there's got to be a PowerPoint slideshow that shows all that somewhere, and I bet you Jack Smith has his hands on it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, didn't they have a PowerPoint? Wasn't that verified?
I think so. I think
there was
so.
actually a PowerPoint presentation. That's how stupid they are, and they probably saved it on somebody's laptop and
on Hunter Biden
emailed it out or something.
It was probably on Hunter Biden's laptop, right next to the dick pictures.
My favorites.
You know, one of the things I've been most concerned about with Jack Smith and the sitting members of Congress and Fani Willis, I've been waiting for the indictments. Everybody's worried about the trials and if they're going to get convicted. I just think when all the indictments come out, Georgia, the superseding indictments for January 6th, because there's going to be a ton of them. I think that's just going to put a damper on the Republican Party as a whole. I mean, they're out there talking loud and proud now and supporting Donald Trump and saying, we were right in this. I think once they all get hit with something and it decimates the Republicans in the House and the Senate, we're going to have a different attitude coming out of the Republican Party, and that will be the beginning of the end of the Republican Party. You can't do that to them and not expect them to survive it. They just can't.
I don't see how they're going to change, but they're so fixated. I mean, like I said, it took George Bush coming up out of Texas to kind of change the image a little bit, and we don't see a George Bush. Like you said, their governors are not likable. I don't think they
No.
have a governor that's likable. They've all gone MAGA or anti-woke in their states, and it might play well with their base, but it certainly won't play well. None of that plays well nationally. And then when the indictments come in, and hopefully there'll be a bunch of congressional people that are getting indictments, and it's going to be hard for them to fix their image. It's going to take them more than one cycle to go ahead and get people to go, okay, that's a Republican Party. They're back again.
But I would argue that it's going to take many cycles for them to get it back. I mean, because we've been going down this path really since the 80s.
Yep.
I mean, with Reagan. But I mean, kind of getting back to the indictment, I'd like to think that the people who are screaming the loudest, the Ted Cruz's, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, those are the ones that are probably scared they have an indictment coming.
Yeah.
I know Ted Cruz has said, well, it's our job to object or certify the election. But I think that's something deeper with him and some other members of Congress.
Well, I think with Republicans, the problem with most Republicans is they only want one thing. They have no policies. They have no platform. It's just all about power and ultimately money. And that's where the disconnect is. Somebody like Ted Cruz, he's like Donald Trump in the sense is he only wants self-enrichment. He only wants money, and that's just, or power and his position. And I think when they start losing those things, it hopefully will change the tone of our Congress totally, because both on the Democratic and the Republican side, we have a certain amount of people that are just about power and not doing anything. Ted Cruz, I think, is going to go down. He's just too fucking ignorant not to go down. He was in the mix on January 6th. But then you have somebody like Grassley coming out of Iowa. He's 137 years old, and he shouldn't even be in the Senate at this point. But there's a lot of people, I think, that were involved in all this shit that aren't as loud and proud that we don't even know. I'm expecting some people to be exposed that we don't expect.
I mean, whether it be like an unindicted co-conspirator or if they actually get an indictment. Yeah, I had forgotten about Chuck Grassley.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of people that had their hand in the cookie jar.
Well, Chuck Grassley, a good example is, it's an interesting story. If you look at it, they want the Trump fucks come and they want to kill Mike Pence. So they take him down to the basement and they're saying, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. And Mike Pence says, no, let's not get out of here. I got to finish the job. I will give him credit for that. A day or two prior, Grassley was talking some shit. He's the president pro tem, I think, because he's so fucking old. He had already kind of figured out that Pence wouldn't be there. This was before January 6th, and that he would go in and do what Pence was supposed to do because they knew he wasn't going to do what he's doing. So Grassley was involved in this to a certain extent, maybe out of his own arrogance or his own stupidity, or he's got dementia or whatever the fuck. There are a lot of people that aren't the glaring criminals that we see now that were involved. I mean, we know in the House of Representatives, there were 135 Republicans that didn't believe the election was real or fair. There's a lot of people that have kind of gone under the radar, and I'm wondering if they're going to get flushed out.
Well, everybody had asked for a pardon.
Yeah.
That we had flushed out. So that's 4 or 5 of those. And they're probably the ones that were the most culpable, that were actually in on the plan. The rest probably wanted to hold on to power, but I'd say it was a good 4, 5, 6. The one congressman that led the tour group around that was taking pictures, he's probably culpable as well, and I can't remember his name.
Loudermilk.
That Loudermilk.
Yeah, then they got that idiot, probably the dumbest congressman in Congress from Texas, the former judge. He's been there a while. I think I think he was on that bandwagon. I wish I could remember his name because he's very despicable. But he's been there for years. Damn, I can't remember his name. And then, of course, Taylor Green and Bobbert and Bobert and the rest. There's only 5, 6, 7 of them that I think will actually be in on the plan. But the others were willing to go with it. Ted Cruz, nobody likes him. I don't think he was in on the plan. I think he was just in on what he thought might be a winning strategy to retain power. So
That could be.
Yeah, I think he's a smart enough guy not to cross that line illegally. Plus, he's so dislikable. He's probably not going to win the next election because he's hated in Texas.
Yeah.
Cancun Ted is kind of a hard nickname to get rid of.
Did either of you guys follow Jeff Jackson? He's a state rep, or I'm sorry, U.S. rep from North Carolina.
Mm-mm.
He's a freshman representing
yeah,
a Democrat.
Yes, I do.
And he's saying that a lot of 95% of the representatives in Congress, it's all political theater. When the cameras are on, that's when they're all up in arms and they're trying to get points or whatever with MAGA or the base. So that's why I agree that there's maybe only 5 or 6 representatives that were really in on it, and the 135 that objected to it because the cameras were on. Well, I'm going to get some political points with the base right now, because he said that he came across on his first day or second day in the House of Representatives someone he never thought he'd be able to work with, and they introduced it, and he never identified who it was, but said someone you see who's very loud and out there when the cameras are on is actually very easy to work with and very just very personable.
He's really great on TikTok. I mean, I do follow him. He's great on TikTok. It's not Mike level great, but but Mike's not in Congress, so yes, he's good. And you're seeing more Democrats show up on TikTok. Yeah, I've even seen a few Republicans on TikTok.
I'm not really that good. I'm just loud and I'm there a lot.
And you're on a boat, so I mean that's a good thing.
On a boat sometimes, yeah.
I think in one day I've seen you in everything that you can possibly be. But I do believe that it's just a handful that were but that handful was going to lead the rest to then throw the election back down to the states if there was chaos up there during January 6th. But I don't know. I'm hoping we find soon, because we need to get the election as under control for our side. And the more of those that are exposed and the more Republicans that are indicted, the better off it is for us, which means it's better off it is for the country.
Yeah, agree 100%, because I can't see how we don't have a blue wave. I mean, because what have Republicans done in the last 2 years to gain more votes?
Other than embarrass themselves, with these ridiculous hearings and shit. I have to wonder too, with all that's happening with the fake electors and the people in the states getting in trouble in Arizona with their fucking audits and all that stuff, you have to wonder if it's going to be a little calmer in 2024 because so many people are taking so much heat. Will that be enough of a deterrent for them not to fuck around like they did in 2020? You would assume so, but again, we go back to Republicans not being very bright and just continuing to doubling and tripling down.
I would say the issue is the laws that have passed to change voting in individual states. So do I think there'll be something underhanded pulled? No, it's already been pulled.
Yeah.
It's going to be harder for people to vote because they've made it so, but it's also harder for their people to vote. And they've got a lot of old fuckers out there trying to vote, and now they're going to have to go in person and stand in line.
Yeah.
But the usual mechanics of a white rural district gets 5 voting machines and a black giant district gets 1. There'll still be a lot of that goes on. I mean, it'll still be the same old people waiting for hours to vote. And then the law is passed that you can't be given water and food, and you can't bus people in. You can't take something from a disabled person and put it in the mail form, all that. Those laws are already on the books. Everything that has changed since the last election. So it remains to be seen if the blue wave has got to be big enough to overcome the hurdles that have been done on the state level. And this happened even in Georgia under Kemp. I mean, everybody has passed voter ID. Everybody has passed some way of suppressing mail-in votes. Everybody has passed laws regarding what you can do in lines and where the machines are going to go. They've all done it. They've done every dirty trick that they can come up with.
But the Republicans are kind of changing things up. I've heard that some of them are coming out and realizing that the mail-in votes are kind of valuable to them. I mean, prior to Donald Trump, more Republicans sent in mail-in votes than Democrats did. And then we had COVID and that became an issue. But I'd heard some Republicans are saying, mail-in votes aren't that bad. They're trying to switch in the middle of the stream because they know that they're going to get hurt by that as well.
I think you're right. But it's other things like taking voting machines out of college towns and voting on campus. That was a big source of votes. So they're playing games, not being able to use your college ID to be able to vote. But if you're registered as conceal and carry, that's a perfectly good ID. That stuff's been going on now for the last few years. And I don't think there are statistics on how that's going to affect the vote. So, yes, it'll be a blue wave. But to be honest, if you're standing in line 7 hours like you would for a Disney attraction, you might not, and it's hot down in Atlanta, you might not want to vote, or if it's pouring rain. So, the Republicans have been pulling out every single trick that they could over the last few years to affect voting. They've made it where if they don't get the vote the right way that they can recall those votes and have a commission to just throw those votes out. They're playing that kind of game.
I like to think that Ohio is kind of a prelude of things to come, because there was an election on Tuesday, and that was that constitutional amendment where not the abortion one, but the 60 to 50% threshold. Right. There's been record turnout, even higher than 2022 in early voting. So I like to think, Ohio has become a red state. But I like to think that that's the direction the rest of the country is going, in lieu of the laws that have been passed in Texas and Georgia and, some of the underhandedness that the Republicans are trying to pull. I just like to think that it's just going to bring people out in even larger numbers because they've had enough of it.
Well, I think that making it harder for people to vote, that's one thing. But the Republicans have done another thing to get more people out to vote, and that's scaring the hell out of them, like people in Florida, like people in Texas. People of color in 2022, even if they had to wait in line 2 hours, 3 hours, they'd fucking stand there because the alternative was worse than having to stand in line for an hour or two. I think the Republicans have sufficiently scared and pissed off enough people. And like I said before, with overturning Roe v. Wade, you took constitutional rights away from 50% of the country that happened to be women. And 70% of the country supports Roe v. Wade, the gun laws, the LGBTQ, the brown people coming across the border. Who do they have left to vote for them? And these people are their very lives. The people down in Florida, you got immigrants leaving the state, leaving their jobs because they're afraid. You got people in the LGBTQ community. You got women scared to death about the future. And I think that's maybe enough of an inducement to get people to do whatever they have to do for one day to get that fucking vote in.
I think I agree with you. I think that they've really pissed off the population. I think they've even pissed off the independents. They certainly have pissed off the independent women. And I think Republican women are looking and going, I can't support this. my daughter is gay. Why, they've put some religious organization in charge of my curriculum at my school, and that kind of stuff. So they've done a lot to really get people angered and worked up over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think people are going to come out and vote to show their displeasure with that one particular party. And it really doesn't hurt that Donald Trump might be their standard bearer, and he might be behind a jail cell when he's doing it.
That'd be interesting to see if he's behind bars and running for president. I don't know. I just think it'll be comical because he won't be able to tweet out anything or or truth stuff out. Like how is that going to work?
I guess he thinks use a phone to call his lawyer and tell his lawyer to
Well,
say something.
I guess the best example is in 2020, we had, I don't know, it must have been the biggest turnout of voters ever, with Joe Biden getting 81 and Donald Trump getting 74 million votes. 2022 was pretty impressive too for a midterm. I think people are whipped up and they are nervous about the future, especially the young people. They're seeing all these old white fucks determining what their future is going to be, and they're mad. They're fucking mad. They're scared, and they're going to vote. And we should thank the Republicans for doing something that no party could ever do before: get people off their couches and fucking voting. You had to throw some fear into it, but that's what they're accomplishing.
Maybe someday we'll see it where you are not fearful, and that's what's driving you to the vote, and you're not mad and you're not angry. I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but it sure would be nice if you just voted because it was your civic duty and you got to pick between a set of ideas, either from the right or the left, instead of always being worked up every 4 years. I'm worked up now. The elections are still a ways away, and I've been worked up since 2020. I've been angry almost every day over something that they're doing. Yeah, come here. That's my dog. She came to see me. She's made herself a dog this week for some reason. It's a little Chihuahua. She just plays the two of us against each other. So
dogs they can do that. Mine does the same thing, except she's up. She's my wife's dog this week, so she's upstairs.
Well, I think that the 2024 is going to be a pivot point for this country, because I think the Republicans will finally take notice that what they're doing is failing. We talked about this before. Somebody said to me, they said, well, what if the Republicans get wiped out in 2024 and Donald Trump is going to jail? You'll have nothing to talk about. And I disagree with that, because again, it's not about Democrats versus Republicans so much. The reason I side with Democrats is because we got a fucking dumpster fire on the other side. We got to put that shit out, and the only way we can do it is with the Democrats. But because they're politicians, we have to be careful. If everything goes right, there's a blue wave, Donald Trump is in jail, all the other people are in jail. Now we got to get down to business. I said this yesterday. We can't take our finger off of the problem with the Democrats, because the Democrats have had their chances over the years. Like you said, with Build Back Better, they could have codified Roe v. Wade, but they had better things to do. It's real easy to get lazy if you have no pressure on you. And I'm hoping against hope that that's not the case when they get power, but we should all be ready to continue to apply the pressure. That's the real, that's our job, and we should be doing it. I think for decades we've been complacent. These times, if they've done any good, it's gotten people to take notice and interact and participate in the votes, because they see how it really is going to affect their future.
It is not a time to be a centrist.
No.
You can't get anything accomplished, and that's the problem with the Biden administration. And frankly, that's what happened with the Obama administration. He came in with this promise of being a progressive and immediately tacked to the center for running. And they go, well, that's where most people are. The problem was, and the problem continues to be, is that is not where the policy should be if you want to help the American people. Being a centrist means keeping the Supreme Court the same way. Being a centrist means keeping commercial insurance instead of Medicare for all. Being a centrist means, well, we'll let you continue to have guns, and we won't. The Second Amendment, we believe the Second Amendment says you could do that, instead of saying we got to be smart about gun and gun violence.
Right.
And that is my only fear. And this is how they screw it up every single time that they get elected, is that they go right to the center. Well, we're going to rule, we're going to do this. The thing is, if they did the things that FDR did, if they did the things that LBJ did, the American public falls right in line with all that stuff. You have to convince them, you have to show them why this is important, but you get the laws passed, and then they just live with the laws that are. Then now you may not get the credit for it, but history will give you the credit for it. And that's the problem with, Biden is just dead center on everything. It won't change. And I don't know that a win in 2024 gets us there, even if it's a big where he owns the Senate and he owns that. When we had Nancy Pelosi, and now we're going to have Jeffries, hopefully, hopefully they will push him along to do the right thing, because that's what needs to be happening. I think Biden needs to be pushed along.
Agree.
Yeah. What does he have to lose? I mean, he's a lame duck president. If when he gets reelected in 2024, what it could be his legacy. People aren't gonna remember what he did in his first term if he doesn't do anything in his second term.
Right.
They're gonna remember what he didn't do in his second term.
But the thing is, it's not even about him. They worry about the people who win in red states. So they're trying to protect them by tacking to the middle. That's always their concern, is how does this affect this 15 or 20 Democrats that won in red states? And instead give those guys in the red states some ammunition to go ahead and win their elections with progressive ideas.
Yeah, like the John Testers of the world. He's a Democratic senator in a very red state. I do worry about the Senate a little bit in 2024. I don't think Joe Manchin has a chance of being reelected.
No.
So I think that you get a Trump-a-fuck at that point. I think John Tester's got a real chance, because I think he does. Obviously, he's got to do really well in the big cities, and the fact that he's a farmer and they like him there, I think. But yeah, I'm hoping at worst it would be 50-50 again in the Senate. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to get some things accomplished, though, they really need to expand the margin in the Senate, and they have to get back the House with a decent margin too. I mean, we've spent so much time with just spinning our wheels because of the 50-50 Senate and the close House, no matter whose side's got it. We don't get anything accomplished. I mean, we've had to resolve ourselves to the fact that with the Republicans in control of the House, nothing is going to get done for 2 years. And to date, that's been true. Nothing is going to get done. Now, that'll work against them in the 2024 election. But this is all too common. This happens all the time. That's why I'm hoping for kind of a breakthrough in 2024, where we do get a fair enough margin in the House and expand in the Senate, so we can actually get some things done. I mean, let's be honest, with all the investigations, the indictments, the charges, all the scandals, all the evidence that's come out, if there's ever going to be a time when the Democrats take a big lead in the House and the Senate, now's the time. If it doesn't happen this time, it ain't gonna fucking happen.
They have to go in, they have to govern like the house is on fire, and they have to keep their base happy enough that the base comes out in the midterm, so 2026. And that's what they always fail to do. They always fail to excite the base, and the base doesn't come out unless it's a situation like what happened 2 years ago, where the population was just plain pissed off and they came out. But 2026, there's no Trump, he's gone. They've got to give them something to want to keep. And that's where I'm not positive that Biden can do it. He's gonna have to be pushed along and support whatever comes out. And it can't be things that we won't see for a long time. It's got to be It's got to be big ideas and big policy and you know, and make big changes in the country, you know, to keep people excited enough to come out and vote again in the midterms.
Well, and to that end, we have to see tangible results. You know, like you said, it can't be something that we're not going to see results for 5 years. It needs to be something transformational, like Build Back Better. You know, to give the middle class a tax cut, raise taxes on rich people, and then you'll see a thriving middle class, and that's how you get people excited.
The one thing that concerns me about the 2024 election is I get people coming to me all the time and, what do you think about Gavin Newsom running in 2024? Or they pick out a bunch of people. And I said, listen, I'm not a huge Biden fan. I have my issues with him, but at this stage of the game, there really is no choice. Biden's got to be the candidate in 2024. To pull up Gavin Newsom or somebody like Hakeem Jeffries or whatever, it's just not going to work. I mean, I think they'd still win, but at this point, we can't ignore the incumbent, whether we like him or not, whether we think he's too old or not. We've got to stick with what it is. And then people say, well, maybe we should get a different vice president. No, keep everything the same. I don't really have that big a problem with Kamala. She hasn't really showcased her stuff, but I liked her a lot before the 2020 election. And I think she'd be fine. Because, I mean, let's be honest, he's going to be 82 in 2024. If he keeled over in 2025 or 2026, that wouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, he's going to be 84, 85 years old. So we have to be ready for Kamala to take over if that happens. And we have to be comfortable with it. I hope that doesn't hurt him in the election, because I think people give her a bad rap.
They do. I think the last show we were on, you and I both agreed that Kamala Harris is perfectly capable of being a pretty solid president.
And I would second that or third that. I agree too. I lived in California before I moved back to Chicago about 10 years ago, and I knew her when she was in San Francisco, and then when she was starting, I can't remember if she was a representative before she was a senator, but I liked her back then, and I agree she'd be just fine as a president.
And I think she would give us the more left, maybe not as far as progressive, but certainly not centrist. She understands what needs to, I mean, that's what we really need, is somebody who's young enough to understand what the real game is here. I think Joe's a fine president. He's accomplished a lot, but because of his age, he's out of touch. I'm not making a slight of him. It's just, against him, but he's just too wrapped up into what old school politics was, and we aren't doing that anymore. It's not old school politics, thankfully.
Well, I'm sorry for bringing a guest on, but she kept jumping up on me.
That's all right.
This is what she wanted. What do you think?
What's her name?
So, looking at the two of you guys, I think Joe. I mean, if you look at you and me, Mike, we're pretty freaking old.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have to fight hard to stay in touch with all the ideas that are available to us. But we do that. And, you know, Joe Biden has got all the policy people around him. He's got enough people and enough advisors, but he gets to be the decision maker, as George Bush used to say. And unfortunately, his decisions sometimes aren't where they need to be. They're not progressive enough.
Well, I think 2028 is a perfect time. Then we can see how Democrats go with, is it Gavin Newsom? Is it, I don't know. You know, Hakeem Jeffries, I think I would like to see him maybe be a senator first, but
yeah,
I like him too. I just don't think a lot of people on the Democratic side are ready, like the Katie Porters.
No, I don't think so either.
Adam Schiff doesn't have the national recognition that, say, like a Gavin Newsom would. But I would not be surprised or against it at all if Gavin Newsom was the Democratic nominee in 2028.
I'd be perfectly happy with that outcome. He's run a big state. He's smart as can be. I've turned him into a big fan. He understands politics. He's wiping the floor with DeSantis. I think both of you gentlemen are right. There are some other standard bearers, but he's probably got the biggest reputation.
Well, the one
Katie,
thing you have to consider about Gavin Newsom too, he is a governor of a state, but a state that has a economy that's is larger than most countries. So he's used to dealing with big time shit. I mean, he would, even though he doesn't have presidential experience or even federal experience, he would be a good choice. He's young enough. He's smart enough. He's very articulate. Well, did you guys hear that that Ron DeSantis has agreed to debate him on Fox? Did you hear about
Oh
that?
yeah, it's good. That's going to be fantastic.
I'm going to watch
I'm-
Fox for once.
Yeah, who's moderating it? It's the same guy who interviewed Gavin Newsom, isn't it?
Is it Jesse Waters or whatever his name is? That
No,
fucking clown?
no, it was who interviewed him. One of the older guys over at Fox News.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I don't watch Fox News, so I don't know them as well. But Ron DeSantis is such a socially awkward douchebag dickhead. He can't help but look bad in that scenario. It's his ego that's forcing him to do this. Like I said, I don't even know why they're doing the debate. What's the point of the debate?
It's a useless debate. It doesn't do anything for the country. It's good for Gavin because
Yeah.
he's going to destroy DeSantis.
yeah.
But for DeSantis, there's no upside whatsoever with DeSantis.
Well,
But he's got such a big ego. I guess he thinks he can debate. He couldn't even debate against Charlie Crist or anybody that's ever seen him debate. He's terrible. He's awful at it.
well, and Gavin Newsom is just setting himself. He's doing an Obama and setting himself up to be a candidate in 2028. He's going to raise his profile. He's probably going to speak at a national convention like Obama did, and everybody will be in love with the guy. I mean, and you know what the only problem he may have, he's Nancy Pelosi's nephew. So that may cause some shit on the Republican side.
Well,
Or he was married. He was married to Kimberly Guilfoyle at one point too.
Oh, good God. Yeah.
wow.
That is a question he needs to be asked. Jesus, what were you thinking? Now I looked it up when his wedding picture with Kimberly Guilfoyle. She was a relatively attractive woman then. She's turned into a fucking gargoyle, but she was a lawyer and seemingly pretty normal. Not normal enough to stay married to, apparently, but they got divorced, and now she's tied up to Don Jr., who makes Donald Trump look like a fucking genius, because Don Jr. There are people talking about this thing with, I don't know if it was Georgia or Jack Smith. I was going to ask what you think about this. Are there going to be family members that are connected into some of these indictments? Because they had to be in the thick of it too. Don Jr. is so fucking dumb. He's got.
I think I was going to say I think that the evil twin of Elvira Guilfoyle, I think she was in on the January 6th. So I think she's gone down. I think the boys are going down because they're screaming pretty loud out there right now. So I think they're involved in it. I think the daughter is tarnished, but I think she's going to walk away clean. So yes, I think there are family members that are going to go down. There's a group of them that were in the room when all this was going down, particularly with the electors. I think they were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I think Ivanka was smart enough to walk away, and she's distanced herself. I mean, when have you seen her anywhere in recent memory? And I never thought I'd say this, but Don Jr. is probably the smarter of the two. Because Eric Trump is an idiot. I mean, he just listen to him talk, and I don't want to be like, your dad will never love you, no matter what you do. But yeah, because they've been screaming loudly lately too. So I think they're going down as well.
But Ivanka may have a problem too, because I think Jared is going to have to explain that $2 billion and the $600 million that they both made while they were working in the White House. There may be some legal aspects that aren't necessarily tied to January 6th that they're going to have some problems with.
if they go after Hunter Biden for influence peddling, they definitely should look at the Trump family for a lot worse than Hunter Biden.
Yeah, but who knows? Maybe Ivanka and Jared, maybe they've given some information, not necessarily flip, but maybe they've been cooperating witnesses, and yeah, maybe they'll get a sweetheart deal like supposedly Hunter Biden got.
Yeah, maybe, but it's going to be a mess. You know, that's the one thing that I think people have to understand. Everybody's worried about these trials getting done before um, January or November of 2024. We are going to have fucking trials until November of 2025 at least. They don't all have to come before 2024. They probably won't all come. And then from those indictments and those charges, it will spawn other things. Like for example, some of these members of Congress or somebody like Jared Kushner, after we get through all this J6 shit and the classified documents, once we get done with that, there's other shit that's going to be coming out of it. The financial criminality of it all, because Jared certainly was in the mix, Ivanka too, and Don Jr. and Eric. I don't know if they were involved with anything because they're not smart enough to fucking do anything, but this shit is going to hang with us, and that's what I'm saying is we get to 2024. There's still going to be trials and all kinds of problems for the Republicans going all the way up to 2028. It's going to be just a fucking mess that's going to seem like it's never going to end.
Well, listen, I'm all for it. You know, keep Jack Smith on the job until it's all resolved. I mean, the guy is a cross between a crocodile and a hound dog. I mean, it's just he'll sniff out something, and then his bite is pretty freaking awful. So I mean, good on that. And if Biden wins, I don't think Jack Smith's going anywhere. And the special counsel statute allows him to keep on going until it's over.
Yeah, yeah. And once he's done, he could run for president in 2028. People would vote for that motherfucker.
I don't know. He doesn't look
No,
too possible.
now, do you think Biden would try to replace Merrick Garland with Jack Smith eventually, or you think he'll kind of stay the course and do the status quo with Merrick Garland as Attorney General?
I think he might get rid of Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland should be questioned about his slowness to this whole situation, but at the same time, honestly, I don't know that Jack Smith would take the job. He's doing pretty good as a special counsel and going back to The Hague and doing whatever he's doing. Who really wants to be Attorney General? It's a fucked up job.
Yeah, it really is.
I think Garland is toast. I think if Biden gets a Supreme Court nominee, I think Garland gets, is first in line for that. That'll be how he gets him out of being Attorney General. But I agree. I don't know who would want that job. It's never been good for anybody.
No, I mean, we've had some that went to jail and Mitchell and all that. What I got one more question. We got to wrap it up because we're going long as we always do. But talking about the Supreme Court, say we get the House, say we get the Senate, and Joe Biden is the president. We've got to do something with the Supreme Court. It can't stand the way it is because we need all three branches working at optimum levels. And the Supreme Court is a joke right now. It doesn't have credibility. And if you don't have credibility in the Supreme Court, you don't have a fucking Supreme Court. And we need one. If they get the House and the Senate and the presidency, what the fuck do they do? Because we know Joe Biden's not really feeling too strongly about expanding the court. Why, I don't know. But that seems like the only option we have to fixing the court. The whole idea of impeaching people, it's too cumbersome and it probably would never get done.
I'll let you take
I think realistically, I mean, yeah, what would have to happen is the House and the Senate would have to pass legislation to expand the Supreme Court and kind of push Joe Biden's hand or force his hand. But at the same time, maybe with Clarence Thomas being wrapped up in this January 6th, he's forced to retire. Maybe one other would, and then the best we can hope for then is maybe someone else retires, like Alito would retire. Right. But the best course that I see is expanding the Supreme Court, and it should be anyway, because there's 13 districts. There should be 13 Supreme Court justices, but absent of that, I think we just hope that Clarence Thomas gets so wrapped up that he has to retire, and we can hope Alito retires as well.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
a Democratic president.
Yeah. I agree with Fred on everything he said. I think Thomas will go because to protect Ginny Thomas. That's what I think. I think that'll be the bill for that. And I think Alito will go because I think ethics will stay prevalent in the Senate. And I think I think the women that are on the Supreme Court, the Democratic women, are going to go ahead and say, yes, we should have ethics reform. And I think that'll be too much for him. And I think he'll just go ahead and retire. So I think, and if Biden gets two, I don't think he'll go ahead and expand the court. If they stay, then I think we should do exactly what Fred mentioned, and the Congress should go ahead and pass a law and force his hand by expanding the court.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap things up here. We could probably go on for another hour or two. I don't know that our listeners could, but we could. So I want to thank both you guys for coming up with the idea of having you both come on. It was, it's great fun when we have listeners on the show, because it makes my job easier, and I think it makes the show more entertaining. And so I appreciate you guys taking the initiative and deciding to come back on. Anybody out there that's a listener wants to do the same, fucking email me. I'm not going to invite you because I don't know who to invite. I don't know who's ready. These guys were ready, and clearly they came through today. So thank you very much.
Our pleasure. It's like the Santana song, Open Invitation.
Open invitation, exactly.
I would appear with Fred anytime, to be honest with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, for those who were listening, I appreciate you staying for the extra amount of time, taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.